Hello, my name is John Danius, and I'm here with Elspeth Lewis. Now, Elspeth is a co-author of a book called Mindfulness for Transformation. And this book has got a number of stories for people who have found mindfulness helpful in dealing with difficulties, and it has contributed to transforming their lives for the better. So, hello, Elspeth. I'd be very, very interested just to hear a bit about your chapter in this book.
Hi, John, and thanks for taking the time to have a chat. So my chapter about my mindful transformation is really about a series of challenging life events which happened in my life over a period of about 9 years, but really focusing on the 5 years between 2009 and to the beginning of 2015, between the death of my mum and then the death of my father, both to the same type of cancer, and in between their deaths going through quite a challenging divorce. So it focuses on that challenging period, and then I guess the transformation that took place for me after that, how I moved forward from there, and how I used mindfulness to help me transform. So yeah.
Yeah, a lot of things happened actually. So, if I understand, you've had two bereavements
Mm,
and close bereavements, and what I mean by close, physically close, you
yeah.
were actually there with both your parents
Yes.
happening.
Yeah.
They lived in different places, a different place to you,
Mm-hmm.
and at the same time you were going through a divorce and you're parenting two
Mm,
children, and that sounds like quite a roller coaster, actually. um,
yeah. Yeah. A huge roller coaster. And I think it's easy for me to look back on that now and see just how traumatic it was. But at the time, I think I tried to simplify everything that was going on. There was this real resistance to losing the normal me, or the normal that I knew. So I tried to cling on to that normal, and deny, I think, what was happening, or deny how overwhelming it was. I tried to keep it small, and that backfired on me. But we react whatever way we react. We are human. I think we just try to keep going as best we can. So in 2007, August 2007, I had my first daughter. And that very same week, discovered that my mum was terminally ill. So that was massive. Um, becoming a mum for the first time, that's a big, big deal. And anyone who's a parent will know that. And then finding out a few days later that my mum had been diagnosed as terminally ill. And my mum and I were never really that close when I was growing up. I was quite rebellious, and my parents were, I guess, quite strict in a lot of ways. But we'd really connected during my pregnancy. We'd really grown close. And yeah, I was kind of looking forward to this time that we would bond. We'd bonded over the common fact that we were both parents, or that I was going to be a parent. And then suddenly getting this really, really devastating news that she wasn't going to be around, that was really tough. So yeah, quite overwhelming, very overwhelming. But as a parent, and you're thrown into first time parenting with a new baby, You just have to keep going. You don't have time to think, as you know. So yeah, that was the beginning of the craziness, the kind of chaotic time, I guess, in life.
Yeah. And I feel that if you have so much stuff going on that you're running to stand still, then how can you even contemplate about doing things to improve yourself? Um, I can even contemplate about, even for example, doing mindfulness or whatever it may be. Kind of like, it's almost as if it needs to hit you on the head.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's a good way to describe it. And I think it eventually did. I ran into a wall, I think. But yeah, you're so right. When you're that busy, you're so focused, or as a parent, you're very focused on making life good for other people, on trying to be a good mum, trying to make sure everything's done properly. And yeah, you don't really have time, or I certainly didn't give myself time. So as well as worrying about my daughter and making sure that she was healthy, and excuse me, she was a very small baby, so I worried constantly about her weight. And as I was feeding her myself, I constantly worried that I wasn't feeding her properly. She wasn't getting enough. So it was a huge lot of almost guilt and shame. And then worrying about my mum as well, and not sleeping because neither of my children slept. So I was really sleep deprived. And yeah, it was, but it's one foot in front of the other. And before you know it, a year has gone. And I probably wasn't really practicing any good self-care, if I'm completely honest. So, yeah.
And you had it sounds to me almost like a breakdown one evening. Is that a
Um,
fair way to
yeah.
put it?
So it was, I think I kept going and kept going, and trying to keep everything as normal as possible. So after losing my mum, a couple of years on from that, I found myself going through, well, separation, and then started the process of divorce. And there were a lot of challenges with that. It was a really difficult time. And then during that, while that was still ongoing, my dad was diagnosed with the same cancer. At the start, we thought his was curable, but quite quickly discovered that he was also terminal. And as you mentioned at the start, he was in a different country. So there were all of these stresses about, well, expense of travel, being there at the right time. And I was fortunate to get there to be with both of them. And I've mentioned in the chapter that my mum's death was really quite peaceful. She chose to have morphine at the end. And the last week or so, it was mainly her sleeping. It was, very peaceful. She would speak occasionally, but quite calm. And that was the death that she wanted. But in March 2015, my dad had opted to stay. He was clearing the attic until 2 days before he died. He was determined to keep going, excuse me, till the end. And so he just literally went to bed on the Friday evening and was chatting away, quite, very lucid, very clear. We had a conversation on the Sunday night, and it was as if he was simply lying in bed. And then he passed away in the very early hours of Monday morning. But he'd chosen not to have any pain relief. That was his choice, but that was really, really difficult to watch, because he was in a lot of pain at the end. And we had, I think it was a Marie Curie volunteer with us, and we phoned the GP about 3 in the morning. I think it was about 4 a.m. by the time she arrived. And by the time she arrived, she said, well, I can't actually administer any medication because then I would be responsible for causing his death. And so we really had to sit and watch this suffering, which was really, it made us feel, or made me feel, very helpless. And that was traumatic. Yeah, we were glad to be with my dad, but it was really difficult to watch and not be able to do anything to help. And I think I've said in the chapter that it was almost as if he was labouring to die, and it was quite a different death, but I'm still grateful that I had the opportunity to be with him. But all of these traumas, all of these moments of trauma throughout the previous years, and then the stress of clearing the family home in a different country and organising that with my 2 siblings, I think that took its toll. So not long after my dad's funeral, I came back to Scotland, and everything that had happened over the last, say, 5 intense years, just, I think it was like we talked about running into this brick wall. It just, I had to stop, you know, it stopped me. And I, yeah, woke up one morning and couldn't move. And it was, I still struggle to describe it. It was one of the most strange sensations. It was almost like a disconnect. I would describe it that way, as my mind was aware, but my body wouldn't coordinate, my body wouldn't respond. And my body wanted to lie in bed and not move. It was almost as if the body had given up. And it was possibly only about 30 seconds. I don't know how long. It might have been longer, it might have been shorter. But it was really quite terrifying, this thought that I recognized that I was sinking into some kind of maybe depressed state that I really didn't want to be in. I could see this happening to me. So it's almost as if I was observing the experience. And I thought in that moment, there was some element of conscious choice. And I remember thinking, I don't want to be like this. I don't want to lie here and slip into this state of non-doing and just no motivation, no drive, no joy. It was a really numb feeling. And I made the choice to push myself to get out of bed and to start repairing. And I got signed off work for 6 weeks with bereavement, and just started to take some rest to try and make sense of what was going on.
It's interesting that it was your body, including your mind, whatever we call it, that put a break. We habitually tend to think that our mind controls everything, doesn't it? That we make the choices about how to deal, for example, with difficulty. And I find it interesting that how you said that you knew that you had to change, and for this grief, not to stop being all your life, to stop controlling your life. because you also knew it beforehand, I'm sure, but there's this deeper knowing, far deeper than that of the cognitive mind. And by the sound of it, when you experience something like this, a realization arises that an embodied realization that there's more to us than the thinking mind, and but we actually need to experience this sense, this type of detachment, this degree of detachment, perhaps to open up to a world of greater choices.
Yeah, definitely. This inner knowing, as you describe it, this wisdom. It certainly allowed me to transform, to really, as you describe this sort of busyness of family life and not having that time, and then almost being forced to stop and listen to the inner wisdom. And it's always there. It's always inside. But sometimes we're just so busy, we don't, and so much is happening, so much is going on, and we don't stop to listen.
And I find it's there's an overlap between what you experience and my interpretation of mindfulness, in that you are not caught up on in your thoughts and actually thinking about it as we're speaking. When you said you were on the treadmill, I'm wondering if was this a mental treadmill? I mean, was this a treadmill that was it your mind that your mind was stuck saying that this is what I've got to do, this is what I've got to do, and then it was this kind of, let's say, softening of the charge that the thinking mind has over us that enabled you to have some freedom, start making other choices.
Yeah, I think even before all of these events, so before I discovered mindfulness, I was always very stressed. I grew up with very academic parents, and I went to a school that was very focused on high achieving, and my school reports were always could try harder, could do better, doesn't pay attention, could do lots better if she paid better attention. And I'd always felt like I had to work really, really hard to achieve. And I applied that to everyday life as well. So especially in parenting and in relationships, in my work, I guess there was always this sense of not being good enough. So of having to really, really try hard to be better. And that leads to really intense stress. So even before all of these stressful life events that were out with my control, I think probably the life I was leading was quite limiting. So there was a lot of stress. Also, when you're brought up feeling that you're never quite good enough, or that you could always do better, I think that leads to quite, well, for me, it was quite limiting. So I was quite shy as a child, and that carried on into adulthood with me. That sort of almost social anxiety on a lot of occasions. So all of that going on in the background, it can lead to a very busy, overthinking, crowded mind. And the first time really that I stopped to regroup was after the death of my dad. To really, that was a turning point, which was forced on me, but I'm grateful for that.
What does this regrouping entail? What's the difference between Elspeth pre and post regrouping?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think when you lose someone or more than one person close to you, it shines a different light on life. We really truly recognize impermanence, and we don't take, or for me, I should say, from my perspective, I don't take life for granted so much anymore. I think before we experience loss of this sort, we think that we're invincible. We have this belief that we will go on forever and ever. And when we realize that that's not true, that life stops, that we lose people close to us, it certainly brings more value to the small moments. It allowed me to be more at peace with who I am. It allowed me to be more authentic. And yeah, I think just it was life-changing to the extent that I cared less about what other people thought. I recognized that actually one day this is going to end. So, it doesn't actually matter what I think or what other people think of me. I just will use this time to be authentic, and that brought a lot of peace.
Yeah, it's amazing that sometimes, perhaps often, it takes a powerful event to jolt us into experiencing life in this new way, actually. And it's just made me reflect on this word mindfulness, because it has a lot of meanings, a lot of associations, for different people. And and then also I'd be interested to hear your view on my take. A common take is that mindfulness is like an exercise, sitting in a room, closed eyes, breathing and noticing the breath, etc., noticing thoughts coming and going, and learning out of this practice. In my take, that this is a mindfulness exercise. This is an exercise to help me become more mindful. And mindfulness, at least to my understanding, is a flavor. It's certain qualities that we can live our life with moment by moment, such as taking it easy on ourselves, such as not taking life so seriously, such as being knowing that, experientially knowing that our thoughts don't make all of who we are. And it seems to me that you developed what I consider mindful qualities through this difficult experience. You did not necessarily develop them through sitting down and breathing. And to me, this kind of means that it's possible for us to develop a more mindful life through a variety of ways, and in particularly through some serious life experiences.
Yeah, Yeah, and in fact, it was sometime after these experiences that I started practicing meditation. So that came later. I think about 2016, 2017, I first sat down to listen to an app, a meditation app. And I would only do that when I felt overwhelmed. At first, it was almost like a refuge, something to go to rather than a daily practice. But yes, this awareness of who I was, or this noticing, tapping into my awareness, happened before I started that more formal meditation practice.
Yeah. And then by the sound of it, it's almost as if like a new room, a new world opened up with the possibility of softening the mind, becoming more at ease, becoming more present, living life in a I would say a wiser, smarter way through difficulty, and using a variety of tools to cultivate that. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just for clarification, could you tell me what does the word mindfulness, what does mindfulness mean to you?
For me, mindfulness is about stepping back into this place of peaceful awareness, no matter what's going on around me. So if I imagine almost as if I'm at the seabed, where it's calm and peaceful, and it's far removed from the ripples on the surface of the lake or the sea. There could be tidal waves, there could be storms, but mindfulness is for me about being able to hold space compassionately from this peaceful place, and allow things to happen. So yeah, that analogy works well for me. That I know some people talk about the clouds passing and stepping back, but this, I think, a sense of going deep within, almost to the seabed, where there is calm, where it's constant, it's quite quiet, and lots of stuff can be happening way up on the surface of the water, but it doesn't affect me in this place.
Is this a binary? Is it a switch that you're either very affected, or that you're either at the surface or at the bottom? So I'm wondering, is it something, could you say, are you mindful sometimes and other times you are not? Or is it a scale?
Yeah, absolutely. I think our minds, well, my mind certainly will wander between the two states, but it always naturally comes back to this place of mindfulness, of observing, whether I'm paying attention or not, that there's always something that will anchor me to bring me back to the present moment. And that's really where I find peace. That's where I breathe properly, and I know I'm being present because my breath really relaxes in that moment. My breath deepens. So yeah, really notice. I think there are definitely two states, two modes.
Thank you.
For me.
Mm. And thank you for opening up
Oh,
to
thank you.
for for these personal matters, actually.
Well, thank you for listening too.
Is there anything else you would like to say?
Yes, I think any message I would like to share with others is that anything is possible when we let go of limiting beliefs. I think for so many years I held on to beliefs about myself and beliefs about all sorts of things. And when we start to let go, we take this step back and really listen to this inner wisdom that we talked about. I think anything is possible. We have this. I think that was another transformational moment, recognizing that we have conscious choice, that we can choose how we show up, which has been a big part of my mindfulness journey, of not allowing thoughts and feelings to dictate, of taking that or knowing that we have that power to choose. And that really is powerful. So yeah, anything's possible.